Hello everybody. One of the things that might be in the exam is direct, indirect speech. Now I can't say for sure if it is or not. All I know is what I've been told, and what I've been told is that it might be in the exam. It's one of the things that, one of the subjects that may have been included because we, as you know, there is so little grammar in our books that, you're spoilt for choice. It's very likely that this has been added. Now I can't say for sure. But it's one of the things that when I asked the question, a lot of people came back and said they're having problems with it. I think you're making it way, way, way harder than it actually is. I think if you get it right back down to basics, it's a lot like clauses. It's actually very, very simple, but we make it complicated in our heads by getting ourselves confused. So we're going to have a quick look, direct, indirect speech, so that we break it down into what it is. And what it is quotations. Direct speech is directly quoted from one person to another. So if Teacher Jack said, "You suck," then the direct version of that is "you suck," in quotation marks. If you wanted to put it another way, in indirect speech, you might say, "Jack said that you suck." Now, because it's indirect, you don't have to absolutely use the words that Jack said. You could say, "Jack said that you're not a great person." And it basically means the same thing, but it's not directly quoted. Now, because it's directly quoted, it has to be an absolute quote, and we have to put it in quotation marks. That means that direct speech is directly quoted from the person who said it to the person who we're quoting it to. So it goes from one person directly to another via a third. Okay? And that's the difference. Direct and indirect speech. Direct is directly spoken, indirect goes in an indirect path. Now, if we look at the way it's written, this should help to clear up some of the confusion. So, if we're using direct speech, I'm sorry if I walk in front of the camera, this is awkward. Jack said, oh God, these pens suck. Let me switch pens and see if I have a pen that's actually black. Because I don't know if this is going to be easy. Oh, I haven't got a board eraser. This place, man. Bear with me. Ah, here it is. Sorry, I do have one. Okay. Jack said, comma, always need a comma, you should review. God, it's been a long time since I stood up and did whiteboard work. Okay. Jack said that you should review. Okay, now these are the two versions of the same sentence. Now in direct speech, we are directly quoting what Jack said. Jack said you should review. In indirect speech, we can say Jack said that you should review. Okay, now it's that. This is what makes the difference. This word here, okay? Now it tells us that we're not directly quoting what Jack said, but instead what we're doing is we're giving you the gist of the information. Now sometimes, as in this example, we are exactly saying what Jack said, but we absolutely don't have to. Jack said that you need to review. Now you'll notice that both of these sentences really say the same thing. You should review. Now if I had a bad student and I said to them, yeah, your work's not very good, you should review. Okay? Now my direct quote there is you should review, but I'm also saying you need to review. I'm saying the same thing. The message is the same, but this is what I actually said. Jack said you should review. Jack said that you need to review. Now the message is the same. And this goes around the houses. It doesn't go directly from what Jack said. So therefore, this is indirect speech. And it really is as simple as that. Direct speech is directly quoted. Indirect is giving you the message. The next piece of confusion about all this is how we present it. And I do agree, it's not easy. Now, as you know, I'm a writer. And I had trouble with this myself. And my editor eventually sent me a copy of a Thomas the Tank Engine book and said, this is how English is supposed to be written, read this, make sure that you get it like this. Because he was so fed up with correcting my bad direct speech. So let's have a look at the main three ways to present direct speech. He said, you must get this right. Get this right. Now this is what confuses most people. Here we have a comma. We don't have a full stop. And what we have here is a capital Y. Okay? Now when we're quoting the exact sentence, and the exact sentence began with a capital letter. So you must get this right is the sentence we're quoting, therefore we start with a capital letter, but we don't end with a full stop. We put the full stop at the end of this sentence here every time because it finishes. The exceptions to that are, she said, oh, excuse me, she said, how does this work? Okay, so there's a question. She said, how does this work? We would normally say she asked, but she said is perfectly grammatically correct as well. She said, how does this work? Now we see again a comma here because we're breaking the sentence. How does this work? And it ends with a question mark. Okay, now this is where it gets confusing with questions. How does this make sense? She, oh no, I made the mistake. She asked. Okay, now we see here, capital letter, because this is what she said. How does this make sense? So this is our direct quote. Begins with a capital letter. We've got inverted commas, meaning quotation marks, and we've got the question mark, which, as you know, a question mark works as a full stop, but we still have a lowercase s. Because it's the same thing. This sentence is closed, but the bigger sentence, which begins here and ends here, hasn't closed. So although we have closed here, and we have to use a question mark because she asked a question, how does this make sense? We still start with a small s. And the reason for that is quotation marks. It doesn't make sense, comma, he said. Because we don't usually use a full stop. This is how it normally works. It doesn't make sense. That's what I say. It doesn't make sense, he said. Full stop. Now we finish here with a comma. And this is how it's normally done. This is how it's normally presented. It doesn't make sense, comma, he said. This is how it works. Now, even though this would normally stand in for a full stop, we use a comma here. That's why we can go with a lowercase h. But the two differences, the two exceptions to this rule are a question mark. Now, the question mark exists to tell us, the reader, that this is a question. Seeing this question mark lets us know to raise our voice. How does this make sense? We raise the tone of our voice as we get to sense. We know it's a question. Take out the question mark. How does this make sense? Now that doesn't sound like a question, so we have to put the question mark in. So it substitutes for a comma as an exception. We make an exception for it because we need this more than we need this rule. Okay? The other exception would be an exclamation mark. Now an exclamation mark tells us that we've said something extraordinary. Grammar is hard. Jack exclaimed. Grammar is hard. Because it's an exclamation mark, it tells us that this was exclaimed. It wasn't just said, it was said with force, it was said with power. Grammar is hard. This doesn't make sense. This is hard. Grammar is hard. Punctuation in this case, Jack exclaimed. Now again, another exception here is when we have a proper name in which always starts with a capital letter. That always is a capital letter no matter where we see it in a sentence. So we take out the comma and we can replace it either with a question mark or an exclamation mark, because those things give us more information in as much as they tell us how to pronounce this sentence, and it's worth it. It's worth making this exception. We could always put a full stop here. We could. It wouldn't be grammatically correct. And it wouldn't be grammatically correct because it wouldn't work. It doesn't make sense. Stop, he said. Reading that would be difficult because you would know that this sentence is closed and you want to continue speaking and you wouldn't know how to do it. So we don't do that because it wouldn't fit. So we use the comma because we know we're going to continue speaking. Even though we've made that statement, we want to continue speaking. And this punctuation allows us to do that. It doesn't make sense, he said. We do that without stopping for a breath. Grammar is hard, Jack exclaimed. We stopped for a breath. Same here with a question mark. How does this make sense? Bell. How does this make sense? She asked. These punctuation points let us know how to pronounce this sentence and how the sentence is structured. They're a guide. That's why we don't just swap this out for a full stop, because it changes the way we pronounce the sentence. So do these. It's worth making this rule to have these two things in there. That's why we allow them to go in there, and that's why we allow them as an exception to the rule. They're annoying, I absolutely agree, but we need this and we need this. Questions are obviously, when you write, questions are in there all the time. They're very valuable. They explain a lot about the way the dialogue is going. Exclamation marks are also very important. Exclamation marks don't work in terms of writing if we use them a lot. If we use them sparingly, then they have value and power. It's like getting angry. If you get angry all the time at everybody, no one cares. You flip out every time somebody drops a pen and it makes a noise, and you get angry and scream at people. Nobody listens to you. Everyone laughs at you. They know you're always going to get angry. Your anger has no value. But if you only get angry at certain times, people take you seriously. That's what the rule is with an exclamation mark. We take it seriously because we don't see it very often, and when we do see it, it gives gravitas to our sentence. So we allow this because we want this extra oomph to our sentence. We want to give it that extra power. So these are the basic punctuation and grammar rules for direct speech. And this is what people tend to have problems with. But it really isn't as difficult as we make it. Now, when we have an exam, I don't know the way the exam's going to be laid out, but I imagine that if you have to write out a question and if you have to change something from direct to indirect speech or the other way around, I'm going to be looking for those punctuation points. If I don't get them, then I'm going to mark your question, your answer rather, I'm going to mark it wrong, because it is easy to get this right. Now let's have a look at turning something from direct into indirect and back again. Jack said, quotation marks, I hate this. Exclamation mark, because I really do hate this. Jack said, I hate this. Okay, so how do we turn this? Direct speech. Now we know it's direct speech because we're directly quoted, and we know it's quoted because we've got quotation marks, inverted commas. So we know this is direct speech. How do we turn this into indirect speech? Now normally if I was in a class, I'd be getting the top 5 students all putting their hands up and saying, oh teacher, I know this one. Of course you do, it's very simple. But I don't have that here, I don't have that luxury, I have an empty room. So what I'm going to do is explain it for you and pretend that I've got students around me who want to learn. Instead, what we do is we take this out. We still have to explain who's talking, we still need the same sentence subject, we still need the same verb, although we can change it. We can change the verb if we want to. It doesn't have to say said, we can have whispered, because you're adding tone to it, you're adding subtleties, nuance. So we can change that if we want to, probably best not to, and certainly for the sake of an exam, keep it simple. So we'll say, Jack said. So the simplest rule is to add that. Jack said that he hates this. And it's as simple as that. We take out the quotation marks and we put in that. And vice versa. She said that I need a shower. She says this all the time. She said that I need a shower. So Jack's wife exclaimed, comma, open quotation marks, you, capital, my handwriting is not great, but that is a capital, you need a shower. Oops. Stop. Okay, so we've got all the same rules. We've got a comma here, because it's every time we're breaking a sentence, we always have a comma either side of our quote. Capital Y, you need a shower, full stop, end quote. So this is what she actually said. Jack's wife exclaimed, you need a shower. Now, if you're reading a book, this tells you who's speaking. We can't use her name because that wasn't established. None of you know my wife's name, so we haven't used her name in the dialogue, and that's exactly what you get in a book. If you were reading through a novel, we would never say her name until we've established who she is and we've given the audience her name. We haven't done that, you don't know her name, so we've just called her Jack's wife. Jack's wife exclaimed, comma, you need a shower. Simple as that. Then the indirect version of that, I've just told you, Jack's wife exclaimed, you need a shower. Now you're telling somebody else. She said that I need a shower. Simple as that. You can also change it, of course, to he needed a shower, Jack needed a shower. Any of those things will do, depending on who you're talking to and where you got the original information from and who you're passing it on to. All of those details change the construction of these sentences because they change the context. But this is how it's done. We change direct speech to indirect simply by taking out the quotes and adding that. Jack said that. Well, we'd have to also change that to he. He hates this. And we could change it back by doing the opposite. Quotation marks. That. I hate this. Simple as that. That's supposed to be a full stop. Apologies. And it's as simple as that. We reverse it by taking out the quotation marks and putting in the word that. It really is that simple. That's how we turn direct to indirect. Now, the rule is direct is directly quoted. It's when we use the absolutely correct words that the person spoke. Okay? That means that we're speaking with absolute accuracy and reliability, so we are doing it directly, and it uses quotation marks. Quotation marks means we're quoting somebody. This means that we're actually taking their words and we're giving you their words without fiddling with them, without changing them, without perverting or corrupting them in any way. They are absolutely as they were spoken. When you do a report, often you'll have to quote what somebody said. So oftentimes you will give a direct quote. You will give exactly what that person said. Albert Einstein said E equals mc squared. So E equals mc squared will be inside the quotation marks because it is exactly what that person said. So these words have gravitas, they have meaning, and they have value. So they are directly quoted. Indirectly, Albert Einstein said that energy equals mass times velocity squared. That's not exactly what he said. He said E equals mc squared. But we've still got the meaning behind it and the gist, but we haven't directly quoted it. So you know it's not actually taken as seriously. We see this in newspapers, although I would also argue it's very corrupted. Jack's wife exclaimed, you need a shower. Now this would be in quotation marks. This is how a newspaper might present a direct quote from a person. They might say, what did you see? Okay, I saw the bus hit a car. So that would be in quotation marks. Or we would say that the pedestrian said that they saw a bus hit a car. And this is why people, oh sorry, the alarm's going off. The bell will ring in 2 minutes. You can see that I'm working through my break because I'm just so goddamn professional. Then they would corrupt it, they would change it around a bit, and you'd know that they're not exactly quoting the person who said it. That would mean that you shouldn't take it as absolutely reliable. However, I would argue that in newspapers it's very easy to get this out of context. For instance, Jack's wife exclaimed, you need a shower. Now this implies strongly that Jack is dirty or he smells. But what about if Jack came home and she accidentally spilled some coffee on him and said, oops, you need a shower. Now, instead of being dirty or scruffy, he actually has been the victim of somebody else's mistake. But if we quoted this, it appears one way, although the truth is another. So it is possible to use direct quotation to actually change the meaning of what's really been said by adding inference. So be very careful of that. But the point of direct speech is that we directly quote what someone said. So remember that word, directly, and connect it to quote because of quotation marks. So direct speech contains quotation marks. Indirect speech does not contain quotation marks. If you can remember that, then you're pretty much set. Turning them around is very simple. Direct speech has quotation marks. Indirect speech has the word that. And once you actually speak the sentence out loud in your head, it's gonna be pretty obvious. I don't think many of you are going to have any problems. Now, as I'm speaking it, you're watching this video, I would think that most of you are looking at going, yeah, this is pretty straightforward. Now, that might drift out of your head by the time you get sat in front of an exam board with a teacher growling at you and with the clock ticking and with a load of things to write out. That might slip out of your head. But remember, quotation marks, direct quotation mark, directly quoted and indirectly stated. That makes it a lot easier. Quotation marks or that. She said that, I need a shower. Jack said that, he hates this. That's the way to remember it. Direct speech is directly quoted. Indirect speech is giving you the gist of what was said, but we are allowed to change it. Okay, I need a shower. That's pretty short, but if we were to say a whole load of things, if I was to tell you everything I did this morning, you wouldn't be able to quote me because you wouldn't remember it, so you'd give the gist. Then you wouldn't be able to directly quote it in quotation marks. You would be doing the other thing instead. Jack said that when he woke up this morning, he broke his toothbrush, something like that. And you'd go on and on saying the sort of things that I said. Wouldn't be absolutely direct. So direct quote, quotation marks, indirect speech, that. And I hope it's as simple as that. So what I've done is I've dropped a couple of links in Google Classroom so that you can have a look at other websites where we go into even more detail. I don't think it's necessary. I think this would probably be the level that I would expect to see in the exam. I would expect to see a sentence of this sort being turned into a sentence of this sort. I would imagine that that's kind of the way it would be. The only other thing I would think they might do is give you a sentence like this and ask you, is it direct or indirect? And you just choose A or B. In which case, if it's got quotes, it's direct. And that's an absolute rule. There might be some exceptions I can't think of off the top of my head. But no, I think that's it. I think if it's got quotation marks, it's direct speech. Yeah, I can't think of any exceptions off the top of my head. Doesn't mean there aren't any, but I certainly can't think of any. So maybe they would ask you, is this direct or indirect speech? More likely they would say, here's a sentence, turn it from direct speech to indirect speech. And that's probably all there is to it. And I would think that this is probably the format and what you can expect from the exam. I wouldn't think it would be terribly difficult. So that's that. So if anyone else has any problems with that, there are links. And of course, you've got your workbook to go through, because we haven't touched your workbook because there's no real value to it. So you've got your workbook exercises you can go through. And I've given you some links to some websites. So it's all pretty straightforward. So we did, what did we do yesterday? We did clauses, main clause and subordinate clauses. So make sure that if you haven't watched the video, watch the video. There's me talking, going through a lot of details. And again, I simplify it right down to a few simple rules so that it's easy to remember. The only other thing that might be in the exam is synonyms and antonyms. So I hope you all know what these are. Synonym, antonyms. Antonyms. So synonyms and antonyms, I hope you all know what they are. If you open a thesaurus, thesaurus.com or dictionary.com, you can look these up. A synonym is a word that is similar, because we've got the root of that word, synonym. And the antonym is the opposite, so anti. So we've got similars and anti. That's how I remember it. Synonyms are similar, antonyms are anti. Okay, so if we've got a word like fast, then a synonym of that word would be quick, because it's like it, it's similar. It means something very close. An antonym of fast would be slow, because it's the opposite. It's as simple as that. So that's what a synonym antonym is. I'm sure most of you know that already. Maybe just help you to remember. Synonym is similar, so Fast goes to quick. Antonym is the opposite. I feel like I've spelt that wrong. So fast goes to slow. I don't know what the format in the exam will be, but I suspect that this is one of the subjects. Maybe it would be find the antonym of this word or the synonym. I don't know, to be honest, but more likely what's happened is they'll give you a load of vocabulary words that we've studied this semester, and they'll ask you for the closest synonym or the antonym of it. And there is no way to study that except to know those vocabulary points. So make sure that you do, make sure you've gone through the vocabulary in the book. If I wrote the exam, then there wouldn't be any vocabulary that wasn't covered in the reading exercises. The reading exercises have vocabulary sections in some of the questions. Make sure that you go through and know all of those words, because that's where I would take the questions from, and that's where I imagine any good teacher would do the same. Okay, that's where we take the questions from. Just to make sure that everybody, no matter who's teaching, no matter who's learning, has equal opportunity to find the answers. We make sure that everybody's on the same page. See, when I write an exam, I mean, for instance, Teacher Colin has several grade 11 classes as well as grade 10. So to make sure that all of our students have learned the same thing, we always go for what's in the book. Therefore, everybody should have covered it. And there's no excuse. If you don't know it, well, it's your fault for not asking the teacher. It's the teacher's fault for not teaching you. But it's in the book. There it is. You've got no excuse for not knowing it. So that's what I imagine that is. Now, the rules for exams are very simple, but there's two that I want to go over. You all know what the rules for the exams are, so I'm not going to flog that because you're going to be told it again in class. So, okay. But the two things I need you to do is read carefully. They reckon about 30% of points lost in exams, 30%, a third of all the crosses, a third of them all go because you didn't read the question properly. So make sure that you read that question properly. You can't get the right answer if you haven't made an attempt to answer the right question. If you've read it and think you know the answer, think you've read it, maybe you get it wrong. Maybe you don't, maybe you do. But most often, honestly, you do. You get it wrong. So make sure that you've read the question carefully and that you absolutely know what you're doing. Excuse me. Excuse me. Read the questions carefully. Make sure that you're actually answering the question that's given. Stupid things people do, like ask for synonyms and they give antonyms, or vice versa, because they haven't read the question. I had one student this semester who answered a complex question with a yes. So what the hell is this? This doesn't make any sense. So I had 10 questions where they were supposed to give me answers and they just written yes. She knows who she is. She's probably not watching this video because I can't imagine that somebody who cares that little about doing the work would actually be bothering to do the review. Don't be like that. So make sure that you read the questions very carefully. I would suggest strongly plan what you do. Go through the exam, work out what gives you the most points for the least amount of effort, and start there. Build those points. Work through everything, make sure you answer all the questions. It doesn't matter if you know the answer or not, make an attempt to answer it. Even if you think you don't know the real answer, you get nothing if you don't try. You know, if you do try, I might be able to give you something. If you get close, especially with comprehension questions, people leave them blank. But if you get close, I might be able to give you 1 point out of 5 or 2 points out of 5 or something. We do try. We're generous markers. We do want to give you the score. We're not looking to fail anybody. We're looking to help you. So give us an answer and try and get as close as you can. Even if you're not 100% sure, make an effort. You absolutely will fail if you don't try. Okay? Not answering the question guarantees you a 0 for that question. So please make sure you answer all the questions. Have a plan of attack. Read through everything first. One of the mistakes I see is everybody opens the thing and starts going through. Now, on the first couple of pages, depends on how it's printed. Some of the questions have maybe 1 point as an answer, and people go through that, and then they've got no time left to do the better stuff at the end that gets them most of the points. So we see horrible point structures. And it's not our fault, because what happens is we hand in the exam. I didn't even write it this year. We hand in the exam and it gets readjusted so that it fits on the paper in the right way. So it can be mixed up. So we don't know what order any of the questions are coming in, even if we wrote it ourselves. So read through the whole paper first, make sure you know all the things that you're going to be doing, and work out a plan of attack. Where am I going to start? Where am I going to spend the most time? Where am I going to put in the most effort? Use that scrap paper. Use that scrap paper to organise yourselves before you even start answering, okay? And another thing is, we're probably going to be doing it the same way that we've been doing it the last couple of years, which is a terrible way of doing it, where you've got the questions and you've got an answer sheet, okay? Now, what I want to see is, I want to see you go from question 1 to question 50, or whatever it is. I don't know what the numbering will be, but I want to see it in logical order. Last year I had a student who answered question 1, then number 7, then number 20, then number 32, and I'm not marking it. I'm just not going to bother. You're going to get a 0 and I'm just going to chuck it in the pile. I don't have time to go through and work that out. So what you've got to do is take the time to make sure it's laid out properly for me, and I would guess that's true of every teacher. You don't want to annoy the teachers. This year I've got nearly double the normal amount of students, so I've got something like over 200 of you, and I've got to mark you all. Last year I had about the same because of the rotation of classes, and it took me 4 solid days to mark this. Now by the end of day 2, I don't care anymore. I don't care. I want to get through it as fast as possible, and to keep myself awake I'm watching movies, playing music, I'm just doing anything just to keep myself focused. And if I see a paper where somebody just hasn't even bothered, I don't care about you either, okay? And that will be true of every single teacher. We are bored of marking. We get bored of marking within the first 20 minutes, believe me. So try and keep it nice and simple. Lay it out logically. Put all of your questions in the right order that they are on the paper, because otherwise we are not going to care. We are not going to go looking for question 10 if it's on a different page. All right? We're not going to go looking for it. So you're going to lose those points. And if it's all scrambled up, it's your problem, not mine. And every single teacher will agree with me on that one. We don't have time for this. We have maybe 2 minutes to go through your paper and get your score. And that's without going back through our scores and trying to count up what's happened. So make sure it's all laid out and organised properly. Otherwise, we will not go looking for your answers, because we just don't have time to do it. And if you mess us about, we don't care to put this right for you. Various different teachers will do that to various different degrees. So make sure you answer it in the right order, make sure that you have a plan of attack, and absolutely make sure you answer every single question and read the questions very carefully. That's the important part about getting through this exam. Do those things and you've got a great chance. Now, I wouldn't panic too much about English. I don't think it's going to be that hard. I really don't, and I think you're ready. Looking at the scores we're getting through quizzes, tests and homeworks and whatever, I think you're going to be fine, but I am not telling you not to put in the effort. Do the review, but maybe focus on the more difficult subjects that you're struggling with. If you're confident with English, I would suggest move on and do something else. I don't think it's going to be that bad, okay? Having said that, I didn't write it, so who knows? So, that's my advice for you to get you through the exam. Now, I hope that's helped. You've got the rest of today to go through your review notes, and I will shut up and leave you to it. Good luck. I will see you on Thursday.